Peter Morin was a shadow that moved across America, unseen and unnoticed until the devastation he left behind became too great to ignore. His crimes stretched across the United States, his victims scattered like broken pieces in a puzzle too complex to solve. Known for his mastery of disguise, Morin lived a transient life, constantly reinventing himself under a web of aliases: Rich Clark, Robert Fred Generoso, Thomas David Hones, Ray Constantino. Each new name allowed him to slip through the cracks of law enforcement, creating an atmosphere of terror wherever he went. With each disappearance, each brutal murder, he grew bolder, as though the very act of evading capture gave him power. Born on February 19, 1951, in Providence, Rhode Island, Morin came from a poor family and quickly slipped into a life of crime. His early years were marked by drug abuse and a disregard for societal rules. In the mid-1960s, he was arrested in Florida for car theft, an event that would set the stage for his future transgressions. After spending time in an institution for juvenile delinquents, he was released in 1968 and began his long, chaotic wanderings across the country. For much of the 1970s, Morin resided in Northern California, particularly in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was there, amid the bustling streets and forgotten corners, that he honed his deadly craft, always moving, always changing identities. He worked briefly as a car mechanic and builder, but his true profession was one of violence. In September 1976, Morin's unrelenting thirst for control led him to a 14-year-old girl in San Francisco. He lured her to his apartment in the Marina District, where he bound and tortured her for hours. He hung her from a ceiling hook, raped and brutalized her. Yet when he was finished, he released her, not as an act of mercy, but as a chilling reminder that he could do with her life as he pleased. This would become a pattern and a horrific demonstration of power that he wielded over each victim. The FBI began to track his movements in 1977, but by then he had already disappeared into the maze of America's cities, leaving authorities to wonder where he would strike next. In 1979, Morin's killing spree escalated. On September 25th, Sheila Griffith, a 22-year-old woman from Las Vegas, was last seen leaving the Silver Nugget with a man. Her body was discovered in the Mojave Desert in November, covered by a sleeping bag. Only a month later, Morin claimed another life, that of 18-year-old Susan Belote. She vanished on January 16, 1980, never returning home after a shopping trip. Her body was found months later, a large stone placed on top of her remains. The medical examiner suspected strangulation, but the exact cause of death remained elusive, as did any evidence tying Morin to the crime. But it wasn't just women who were victims of Morin's deadly grip. In June 1980, Cheryl Daniel, a 20-year-old woman, was abducted from a supermarket parking lot in Las Vegas. Her body was discovered months later with a gunshot wound to the head. Just months before, in 1981, Sheila Whalen, 23, fell victim to Morin in Colorado. She was found stabbed to death in a motel room, her belongings scattered in a way that suggested Morin had taken them after his brutal assault. Yet, it was his later victims who would mark the beginning of the end for Morin. In November 1981, Morin abducted Pamela Jackson from a Corpus Christi apartment complex. She was held captive for 11 days, subjected to repeated assaults and threats. During her captivity, Morin made her dye her hair from blonde to brown, a twisted symbol of control. On December 2nd, Jana Bruce, a 21-year-old executive secretary, was abducted in the parking lot of the Hilton Inn. She was found the next day, floating in a culvert, her body bound and asphyxiated by ligatures. For the first time, fingerprints found at the scene linked Morin directly to the crime. Morin's reign of terror came to a head on December 11, 1981. After attempting to steal a car, he shot Carrie Scott, 21, and Drew Valdez, 25, outside a San Antonio restaurant. Scott died soon after, while Valdez survived. Hours later, police surrounded Morin's motel room, but he escaped through a bathroom window. On December 12, 1981, Morin crawled out of a bush in the parking lot of a Kmart and approached Margaret Mayfield Palm, 30, and forced her at gunpoint to drive him to a Greyhound bus station in Kerrville in order to purchase a ticket to Austin. Police were waiting for Morin when he arrived, and he was taken into custody and transported back to San Antonio. By December 29th, Morin was charged with the murder of Carrie Scott and held without bond in connection with the other killings. Yet, despite being in custody, his nightmare was far from over. Morin was investigated for a total of 48 violent crimes across multiple states, each case a chilling testament to his ability to evade the law for years. The FBI believed he was responsible for murders in Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Texas, and California, his list of victims growing ever longer as his killing spree spread across the country. It was only after a long investigation that authorities began to piece together the full extent of Morin's horrors. In prison, Morin found an unexpected outlet: religion. He converted to Christianity, a strange turn for a man whose life had been one of violence and manipulation. Some saw this as an attempt to atone for his sins, while others viewed it as another layer to his complex personality. As his execution date approached, Morin withdrew all appeals, refusing to delay the inevitable. On March 13, 1985, just after midnight, Morin was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. In his final moments, Morin seemed oddly calm. His last meal, a seemingly mundane choice of steak, baked potatoes, and banana pudding, belied the twisted life he had lived. His final words, "Father, forgive these people, for they know not what they do," seemed detached, devoid of any real remorse for his actions. As he lay strapped to the gurney, technicians struggled for nearly 45 minutes to find a vein suitable for the lethal injection, a chilling reminder of the decades of drug abuse that had scarred his body. When the injection finally entered his system, Morin was pronounced dead at 12:55 a.m., becoming the sixth man to be executed by lethal injection in Texas. Yet, even in death, Peter Morin remains a haunting figure. The mystery of his full list of victims, the questions surrounding his motives, and the terror he instilled in the many places he touched still linger in the collective memory. He was a man who lived in the shadows, moving from city to city, leaving behind a trail of fear and death. And though his life ended with a needle in his arm, his legacy continues to haunt the families of his victims, the investigators who never fully solved the puzzle of his crimes, and the dark corners of American history that will never forget the name Peter Morin.